Realize I'm muted. Let's start over. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Indie Fantasy Friday Review Reports. Today, we're doing something a little different because normally you guys are tuning in on Fridays to hear my open, honest, unpaid reviews of fellow indie fantasy authors' books. And I know that originally this week I was going to be reviewing other SPFBO authors' books for SPFBO9, which is the self-published fantasy blog off. But given that my SPFBO review came out yesterday, I felt like it would be more appropriate to pause reviews of other people's books, just push that back by 1 week, and instead dive into the review of my book. So for once, me, the reviewer, is getting reviewed, and I'm super excited to share that review with you guys and chat about it. If you are interested and have any questions, thoughts, comments, you can drop them in. I just want to start out by saying that I want to thank Esme Roslin so much for the thought and care that she put into all the reviews she did for the SPFBO9 participants in her mini batch. For those who don't know how the self-published fantasy blog off works, the 300 books are divided among 10 blogs, so that's 30 books per blog. And some blogs like Fantasy Book Critic, who my book was a part of or assigned to, have reviewers that get mini batches, and those reviewers each pick a book that gets considered for moving on to semifinalists, moving on to finalists, and things like that. So Esme had the grueling challenge of picking 6 books, from 6 books, 1 semifinalist. And if you would like to see all the reviews for all the books that Esme had, the link is in the description box for that. But Esme is a blogger for Fantasy Book Critic and SPFBO9. She's also officially a contributor for the Before We Go blog, but not judging with them this year. I think this is sort of a new turnaround. And Esme's on. Hey, Esme. Thank you for all you do. So, yes, if you tune in because you're like, oh, Catherine's devastated, I'm actually really ecstatic about my review, even though my book is, spoilers, not one of the semifinalists. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about why that is and share Esme's review publicly with you guys, because as authors, if we can't accept criticism of our own work and look at it constructively and use it to become better writers, especially when it comes from a professional who reads a lot, who knows what they're talking about, we won't improve in our craft. And I say that as a developmental editor for a day job, that I'm also an author. I know how it feels to have that ripped off, but like the scab ripped off and your heart put out there. And that's why I genuinely mean I'm so proud of everybody, even the ones who didn't make the cut. There's some great books. So with that, we're going to dive right in. So I'm going to take my face off the screen. I have a few slides. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the entire review. I will point out a couple things from it, but mostly on the constructive criticism side, and just talk about them from the fact that I just released the expanded edition literally last week, although it has been in the works. I mean, it's over 100 extra pages. It's been in the works for quite a while. And the main reason I was thrilled about this review was seeing someone acknowledge that the changes that I made in the expanded edition were needed, as well as pointing out the strengths that I had in my debut epic fantasy, because the Vow That Twisted Fate was my debut. But Esme says, the Vow That Twisted Fate is an imaginative and intriguing mix of epic fantasy, portal fantasy, and sci fantasy, with court intrigue, alternate dimensions, time travel, dystopian elements, and a dash of romance mixed in. And I realize that might sound like a lot, but trust me when I say that Katherine Graham somehow makes it work. And then there's a little bit of the blurb there. I have the link to the full review, again, as I said, in the description for people who want to read the entire thing. Esme goes on to say, now you might get a simple good versus evil vibe from this premise, but I was pleasantly surprised to find out that the author has given a very unique spin on that familiar trope here. It is hard to go into details without spoilers, so all I will say is that I was very impressed and happy with how complex and nuanced this story turned out to be. And goes into some of the things that she liked about the novel, which I greatly appreciated, and I think is the mark of a really strong reviewer. If you've watched my book reviews or you follow my Readsy Discovery, where I do my own book review blogs, then you know that I am known for being a little brutally honest, but saying things that are strong about the book are important too, because most books have strengths that other readers will like, even if they aren't my specific cup of tea. And Esme really did a great job with that in hers. And I'm not just saying that because she's tuned in on the line. But every single book in her mini batch, she went into strengths and then went into areas of opportunity. And that is what really helps authors grow. So going on to sort of those opportunities to grow when it comes to Vow, Esme says, however, I do personally feel like this story was maybe a bit too big and ambitious for the amount of pages that this book is. The setup and premise of the story are so amazing, but the overall execution left me a bit wanting in the end. The first 30% of this book is quite action-packed, yet at the same time, there is very little character development and plot progression, which is why when things did eventually kick into gear, all the crazy twists and reveals didn't land for me because of the lack of investment at that point. The big showdown also doesn't happen until the very final chapter, which makes it feel rather rushed and almost anticlimactic to me. I think it all comes down to the fact that I just wanted a bit more of everything, more time to get invested in the characters, more development of the side characters, more time to explore this fascinating world and universe, and maybe even more perspective, especially from the villain's side, to just experience and admire this world and story in all its glory. Now I've seen that the author is releasing an updated / extended second edition of this book soon, so I'm definitely going to keep my eyes out for that, because I think that might just give me exactly what I wanted from this story. And all that said, I think there is still a lot to love about this book, and I honestly had a fun time reading it. First person present tense isn't usually my jam, but Graham made it work so well here. The writing is immersive yet approachable, which gave this story that bingeable quality that kept me hooked the entire way through. So yeah, it was a fantastic review. I was very, very excited. There's more to it, as I said, and you can read the full thing. But again, there are several good points here that do feed into the expanded edition. And I'm wanting to share those because if you're an author and you're watching, you know that I also have an author behind the scenes playlist. And I've tried to be very public and transparent on my journey. And even though I'm a developmental editor, I've also said on many lives, if you watch the channel, you know that you just can't edit your own work the way you edit other people's. So the input of developmental editors, of beta readers, of reviewers are invaluable. And in addition to Esme, out of the 90 reviews I've had on Goodreads, I was able to pick up very early on what could have made my debut better. And as I said, this has been in the works for a while. The release of the expanded came out before this review, so it was really nice. So how does the feedback that I got from Esme and the reviewers prior to that play into the expanded edition? Really, it comes down to the amount of time spent on the pages. So the first edition, which is what Esme read and what I submitted to SPFBO because I just couldn't get the expanded ready in time for SPFBO in June, was 350 Amazon pages, which you see here. The brand new expanded edition, which came out on July 9th, 2 days after the release of the initial first edition, is 467 pages. That's 127 pages more than the original. And a lot of those pages went into clarifying things in not the first chapter, but sort of just the overall setup of the book, clarifying things like how this magic system works, setting up some relationships that I felt were obvious as the author, but that the readers didn't pick up on necessarily. And I can't say too much about them without being a major spoiler, but like one of the big romances had hit a lot of reviewers off guard, and they're like, whoa, I didn't see that romance coming, and not necessarily in a good way. Like, where did that romance come from between these two people? And so going back and being able to go through the deleted things that I had taken out of the book and reintegrate that into the book made it stronger. And I was also able to revise the overall style of the book and take out some of the more amateur writing habits, like doing too many dialogue tags and things like that, and expand on the ending as well as a few scenes in the middle. And I've added in 3 scenes that have never been published before as part of the book. one about the dwarves, and one about Elsie, and then one other that I cannot say because it will spoil the book. So that you'll have to read. So I think really, I'm just excited. I didn't realize it was over 100 pages. It was over 20 pages in my Microsoft Word file, which is what was on the original graphics for people who saw it on launch week. And then when I went and saw it on the Amazon thing, I was like, well, now there's 127 extra pages. And I was sort of nervous that was I making the right decision putting out the expanded, knowing that it was going to be that much longer. I was worried it was going to slow the pace of the story too much. And so Esme's review gave me the confidence that I'd made the right decision to slow down and explain those elements and do the proper setup so that the story follows through in a way that makes sense and does help those twists sort of hit home, and shed some light on things like in the beginning, something happens with the main character's mother, and sort of trying to figure out that relationship and how the main character ended up where she was, and little details. If you've read the book before, they might be like, okay, that makes sense. If you haven't, I don't want to spoil it for you. So with that, the expanded edition is here. As I said, you can grab a copy for 99 cents on ebook on all the major retailers now. It looks like the updated version should, knock on wood, have now uploaded to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple, Smashwords, all of those platforms. So you should be able to grab a copy of the fully re-edited version. This is an epic fantasy. It's aimed at new adult readers, and it has a clean romantic side plot, although the romance is not necessarily the main focus of the story. And you can grab it at that www.books2read.com/the Vow That Twisted Fate. Oh, yay. Thank you, Esme. Sounds very promising. You know, I wrote The Vow That Twisted Fate, for those who don't know, and maybe you're newer. I wrote The Vow That Twisted Fate when I was like 13 or 14. And I was too attached to it when I put the debut out. And I'll speak more to this coming Wednesday. If you're an author and you want to know what made me decide to re-release an expanded version, tune into that. So I won't spoil it all here. But the more we write and the more we read, and in my case, the more I edit, the better my writing style gets, the stronger my personal writing voice gets. And I feel like that's reflected a lot better in the expanded version. Whereas in the first edition, I had kept sort of that initial just launching into professional writing voice. So I do feel like I was able to learn a lot from the SPFBO contest this year, thanks to Esme and the feedback from other authors. And I'm excited to see what comes next. I'm excited to see what you guys think of the new edition. If you want to read it, leave an honest review for it. It's always appreciated. And don't worry, next week I will be coming back with the Indie Fantasy Friday review report that you guys were expecting. I've got a few different SPFBO names on here. We've got Carol Carmen's Twice Time, Zach Argyle's Voice of War, and K.E. Andrews' Hills of Heather and Bone. I've also got one that I did for Reedsy that I wanted to share with you guys because it's got a really original premise called The Dragon Slayers Guild by J.D. Brink. So I will be touching on all of those next Friday at 2:30 p.m. Central Time. If you like this video, like and subscribe to catch next week's episode, and I hope you have a great weekend. Bye, everybody.